All all right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Zach Ford. I am the chair of the Dusty Baker-Sacramento Sabre chapter, and we are excited to have one of our own, Steve Treder, as our speaker today on his great new book, 40 Years a Giant. Just a few housekeeping items. Please mute yourselves. We will have an opportunity to ask questions later on. You can either do that by asking questions through video and audio, or you could also ask them in the chat. So go ahead and take it away, Marlene, who will introduce Scott Carter, who has an announcement, and excited to hear what he has to say as well.
Thanks, Zach. It's so good to see everyone. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to see your smiling faces. I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days. I'm delighted to introduce Scott Carter, who is the newish Executive Vice President of Sabre. He's joined us tonight to bring us up to date on several of the current Sabre initiatives and big plans for Sabre this summer. So Scott joined Sabre last year. So he's had quite the time getting used to all of us on Zoom. And we all look forward to getting together next year in Baltimore, if not before. So Scott, please tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us more about all the good things going on at Sabre. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for that very, very warm welcome, Marlene and Zach and Steve. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet, or at least see some of your faces. I see a few folks that I've talked to on the phone that I'm glad to, yeah, Perry, hi Perry, folks that I've not yet had the pleasure of being on a Zoom with. So this is great. It's awesome to see all y'all. A little bit of background on me, like Marlene said, I joined Sabre last year in the fall. And before coming to Sabre, I was in baseball in other lives for about 15 years, most of them coming in minor league baseball. So as for our Bay Area contingent here, I was actually the vice president of marketing with the Fresno Grizzlies for about 6 years while we were the Giants affiliate before they jumped ship to Sacramento. I can't say I blame them, but that was a different time. But got to work with a lot of amazing players coming up through the ranks at that time. Probably my favorite minor leaguer of all time was Tim Lincecum. Working with Timmy and his 6 AAA starts, I believe, was something I'll always remember. He was amazing, and then also got a chance to work with Buster Posey, Madison Bumgarner on their way up as well. So spent a lot of good times with the Giants, and then had moved on. My last stop in minor league baseball was in Durham, North Carolina. I was with the Durham Bulls as their director of marketing for several years. So that was a fantastic place to be in terms of minor league baseball. One of the best, if not most well-known minor league franchises in the country, and it was just an awesome place to be. And then I moved here to Phoenix about 6 years ago to take a job with Camelback Ranch as their director of marketing, and Camelback Ranch is the spring training facility for the Chicago White Sox and a team that shall not be named from Los Angeles. So that was a lot of fun. It was great to combine basically like a minor league side of things where you have your hands in a lot of the business operations and a lot of different facets, but then also get to work with the major league clubs and get to build some relationships there. I ran the fantasy camps for both the White Sox and the Dodgers, so got to know and got to work with a lot of fantastic alumni from both teams and putting those together. So great run there, and then I got a call from my good friend Scott Bush, who also worked with the Fresno Grizzlies about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, however long that was ago, but we worked together back with the Grizzlies, and was talking about an open position with Sabre, and I had been a member of Sabre and wanted to and he basically, the way that he spelled it out and the way he talked about all of you and the members and the researchers and what was going on in the future of the organization, I really couldn't miss the opportunity. So that's how I got to Sabre. Now we've been working remotely this entire time. So I basically have 2 coworkers in Chanel Zapata and Jacob Pomeranke, who I've met once in person. And it was a quick like, hey, how's it going? And then out the door. So it's been a strange year, but Sabre's doing great things, and we're really excited about the future and certainly this year. So that's a little bit of background on me. I've got two amazing little kids. I've got a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old son. They both are now on summer vacation, so working from home, with my wife working from home as well, and then also having two kids on summer vacation who don't understand what working from home is. They think it's time to play video games and play catch all day, so they don't understand why dad can't play catch in the backyard all day long. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. So that's my background in a nutshell, but would love to catch up with anybody if you've got any questions about my background or what I do with Sabre. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. Really, the only real purpose in me dropping in today, outside of meeting you guys and gals, is to tell you about our upcoming Summer of Sabre Golden Celebration Series event. So in lieu of an in-person convention this year, and obviously we'll be back in Baltimore in 2022 for our next in-person convention, this summer we've got a great slate of virtual programming put on by the national office, taking place in June, July, and August. Now, again, it's called the Summer of Sabre, or it's our Golden Celebration Series, as we highlight the breadth and depth of Sabre in its 50th anniversary. So it's a really cool event. Every single session is going to be completely different. So there's a wide range of topics. So there's really going to be something for everybody. So the first one, like I said, is June 25th, 26th, and 27th. So that session, those sessions right off the bat, like the first one on June 25th is going to be about the future of baseball. So we have an awesome panel that's lined up for the future of women in baseball. So it includes Janet Marie Smith from the Dodgers and Orioles, as well as Bianca Smith, the coach from the Red Sox. Awesome panel. 26th of June is going to be our annual business meeting. And then on the 27th, we've got a fantastic panel on international baseball, where we've actually got some speakers lined up from the teams that have already qualified for the Tokyo Olympics to talk about their baseball clubs. So it's going to be a really cool first weekend. Now, details of the event for the entire session. So June, July, and August, 9 total virtual sessions. There's only one registration price. So it's $35 for members, $50 for non-members. And you register one time and you will be signed up for the entire thing. So even if you miss one or you can't make it to one, just sign up. You'll get them all. We'll send videos after the fact. So it's a really cool event. $35 gets you into all of them. So that's 9 sessions for the price of one. The entire, I didn't mention the July session. So July 23rd through 25th is actually going to be the entire Jerry Malloy Negro League Conference. So if you've never had a chance to attend the Negro League Conference, the July sessions are basically just going to be the entire Negro League Conference wrapped up into this Summer of Sabre event. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we actually just announced, for a little fun but between chapters, last week we announced a chapter competition. So I'm sure Zach and Marlene will be spurring you all on to sign up. But we actually announced a competition that we're going to have 2 winners. The chapter that has the most folks sign up for the Summer of Sabre event, and then also the chapter with the highest percentage of their membership that sign up. 2 winners. Those chapters will win a fully catered lunch for their next in-person chapter meeting in the future, whenever that may be. But we're excited to put that out in front of you guys as some incentive to join each other and sign up for the Summer of Sabre event. I'll drop the link in the chat if you haven't already been there to see the sign up and the details of what's been announced already. But we're really excited about it. Hope you guys can join us. It'll be a lot of fun. And that's all I came to do, was get you guys excited about that event.
Can you say something about the current campaign for Sabre 50, because that includes the conference?
Yeah, great point. We're in the last week of a fundraising campaign called the Future 50 campaign, and it's really focused on building our sustainability to fuel the next 50 years of baseball research. So if you make a $100 donation to that campaign, your registration to the Summer of Sabre event is included. So make the $100 donation, and we will take care of your registration for you, and you're good to go with that, as well as a lot of other cool gifts. There's lapel pins and cool books and cool stuff with the 50th anniversary logo on it. So there's a lot of exciting stuff. So if you've never donated to Sabre before, we encourage you to do so. It's something that allows us to put on events like Summer of Sabre and to fuel awesome research projects moving into the future. So really appreciate the time, guys. And I'll stick around for a little bit if anybody's got questions, but I don't want to cut into your meeting.
Well, thank you, Scott. Is that my cue, Marlene, to, all right. Excuse me. Thank you so much, everybody. What a dream come true this is for me. If you've ever written a book, you know how hard it is. Many, many years of effort, and it's finally come to fruition, and I'm able to talk with my great friends at Sabre about it and share this with you. I don't have a formal presentation prepared because I do want this to be interactive. I want to hear from you. I want you to ask questions and me to talk about what you guys are interested in. There's just so much to talk about. Horace Stoneham's career was so long and involved so many, events and people that it's a target-rich environment for plenty of topics to talk about. So I'll hopefully hear it from what you folks want me to address. But to frame it up, I thought I'm going to do 3 short little readings, not long readings, 3 short little readings to sort of set it up here. Because we're here in the Bay Area, I'm going to frame it of the 3 points in Horace Stoneham's tenure as owner of the Giants when he was in San Francisco, sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end of the San Francisco period, and it sort of frames up what his experience was owning the Giants in the Bay Area. So the first little excerpt I'm going to read here, this is on page 227. This is the conclusion of the 1959 season. The 1959 season, the Giants were in first place into late September, but then got swept by the Dodgers at home on the next to last weekend of the season and didn't recover from that, and so finished in 3rd place. So this is where this excerpt happens. It ended sadly, but with perspective, Stoneham and the Giants had to conclude that 1959 had been a remarkable, exciting season. It surely had been a successful year financially. In their little bandbox of a temporary home, the Giants drew 1,422,000 in 1959. Stoneham was so delighted with the support that during the final homestand, he inaugurated a fan appreciation day, an event that would become an annual tradition. Lucky fans would be awarded prizes if their seat number was drawn. The prizes in 1959 included a 15 cubic foot freezer, a hi-fi set, a black and white television, a color television, and the grand prize, a brand new Cadillac. Beginning in 1960, they would need that little bandbox no more, as the big, modern, car-friendly stadium Stoneham had long sought would now at last be his. In just a few years' time, Stoneham had sidestepped what had seemed to be intractable, existentially threatening problems, and now, placed within a dynamic, affluent, fast-growing region in what would soon be the nation's largest state, with an exceptionally talented, still very young team ready to take that brand new field, it's difficult to imagine how the future could have appeared much brighter. That's 1959. Let's fast forward to 1968. In the 60s, which you no doubt know, the Giants had won a very exciting pennant in 1962, but were unable to repeat it. And in 1968, they finished in 2nd place for the 4th consecutive year, the first time in Major League history that had ever happened. The Giants were very good, but not great. They weren't good enough to repeat as a pennant winner. And the pattern of the teams the Giants had in that period were very striking. They had a core of talent that was unmatched. No other team in baseball had the core stars that the Giants had, but they couldn't win the pennant because they didn't have an adequate supporting cast. There, along with the stars, there were great weaknesses and holes on Stoneham's rosters. So this is 1968. Putting together a competitive Major League roster is a genuinely difficult endeavor, and every general manager makes mistakes. Horace Stoneham, as the architect of this ball club, deserves full credit for the scouting and farm system operations that delivered the remarkable talent core. But Stoneham must also be held accountable for the failings of so much of the supporting cast, especially given the pattern of ongoing lineup holes left unfilled year after year in this period. Stoneham seemed to develop blind spots. either not recognizing serious problems or perhaps being complacent that his ever-productive farm system would soon provide handy solutions. By 1968, the Giants' persistent failure to fulfill their promise and win another pennant was more than just a sporting disappointment. With the presence of the Athletics in Oakland, the financial competition was now real and pressing. Bay Area baseball fans could now choose to spend their ticket money on a young, exciting, and improving A's ball club that was introducing new stars such as Reggie Jackson, Sal Bando, and Catfish Hunter. In their first season in Oakland, Charlie Finley's Athletics drew 837,466, which was more than they'd drawn in Kansas City since 1959. The Giants in 1968, the bloom off their rose, drew a near exact total of 837,220, not only by far their least since arriving in San Francisco, but also about a third less than their attendance of 1967 and a bit over half of what they'd drawn in 1966. This amounted to more than $1 million in suddenly vanished ticket and concessions revenue. The Giants played 75 home dates at Candlestick Park in 1968, and in only 9 of them did they attract a crowd of 20,000 or more. In 45 of their dates, the gathering was below 10,000, and 18 times it was below 5,000. On Monday afternoon, September 16th, the Giants beat the Cincinnati Reds 8-4 at Candlestick in front of just 2,361, a new record for the least attended major league game in San Francisco history. So now let's go to 1974. By this time, the situation for the Giants is not just ominous, it's desperate. The Giants in 1974 absolutely needed to be if not a pennant winner, a very strong contender, a really, really good club that would stimulate interest and draw some fans. And they look, on paper, they look capable of it. The Giants roster in 74 was quite impressive. So here we are, the early season of 1974. The 1974 Giants jumped out of the gate nicely. In the season opener at Candlestick Park, which attracted just 17,527, Gary Maddox hit a 3-run homer. Tom Bradley took a shutout into the ninth. The Giants handily defeated the Houston Astros 5-1. The next day, Steve Ontiveros homered, and Mike Caldwell got the 3-2 win in his San Francisco debut. And then the Giants made it a sweep and a romp, 8-4, with Dave Kingman detonating a 3-run bomb. Following that, the Giants took 2 out of 3 from the defending champion Cincinnati Reds. John D'Acquisto picked up his first win of the year in that series. And a week into the season, they were 5-1, tied for first place with the Dodgers. Excuse me. But over the next month and a half, the Giants played mediocre baseball. At the end of May, they were 27-25. Not a bad record, but not good. And while they'd been plodding along, the Dodgers were sprinting away to their best start since 1962. The Giants were already 10 games behind, languishing in 5th place. The strongly contending season the franchise so desperately needed was looming out of reach before summer had even begun. Without a pennant race to stimulate interest, the fan base was paying less and less attention. In the months of April and May, the Giants attracted an average of 8,770 per game, which would give them attendance of just over 700,000 for the season. That would be significantly below even the modest attendance achieved in 1973, and the growth in ticket and concessions revenue the franchise so desperately needed was simply not materializing. Everyone understood that this meant disaster. Stoneham and the front office were agitated, and manager Charlie Fox was feeling intense pressure. So there I've teed it up for you. Logistically, I'm not quite sure how we want to handle this. I guess you can use the chat function to write your questions, and I can respond to those, or just unmute yourself if you want to, and I'll be happy to answer your question verbally. I think I saw a written question. Let me get to that. There is a question from Dennis Selling. Are there a couple of things you learned about Horace Stoneham that surprised you or changed your perception of him? Well, there were so many things that I learned. I think what I wasn't surprised necessarily, but I really began to appreciate, which I hadn't before I undertook all this research, just how smart and industrious Horace Stoneham was. You know, we all have his public image of being a nice guy, which he genuinely was. He was really, everybody who knew Horace Stoneham just loved him. He was a very, very nice person. But he wasn't just nice. He was also smart and tough-minded. And very hardworking, very dedicated to his responsibility of owning the Giants. he'd inherited the team from his father, and he felt obligated to honor his father's wish that his son take over the team. And so Horace Stoneham worked very, very hard and was dedicated to making the Giants be as successful as he could. And that's why it was so frustrating for him that although they were very good, they weren't quite great. And that was a great frustration to Horace Stoneham. Another question here. Others have opined that Stoneham's alcoholism led to poor judgments, beginning with moving the club from New York to San Francisco, followed by poor business and roster decisions. What do you think? There's no question that Horace Stoneham was an alcoholic. I think the proper terminology to describe him would be a high-functioning alcoholic, in that he drank every day, but he didn't drink to the point of incapacitation. He was at work every morning, and he worked all day every day. Certainly, it would be impossible to conclude that alcoholic behavior didn't impede his judgment and cause him to make mistakes, but it's certainly very difficult to see a direct one-to-one correlation. The question says a poor judgment was moving the club from New York to San Francisco. That wasn't a poor judgment at all. That was a brilliant move on Stoneham's part. He saved the franchise by moving to San Francisco. He made a number of questionable trades, and the number of those trades kind of mounted in the late 60s and into the 70s. And once again, we don't know exactly what his state of mind was when making the final decision on those moves, but it's certainly possible that he was having a hard time. Certainly by the last couple of years, he was having a hard time keeping up with the demands of his job. Understand that he wasn't just the owner. He was the general manager. He ran the entire operation. He did everything himself. He oversaw the scouting department. He made all the roster moves. He didn't make his decisions alone. He was very collaborative. He had a circle of advisors upon whom he really did trust their judgment and listened. There's another thing about Stoneham. He was a good listener. He listened to input and advice. But did he make some mistakes? Oh yeah, he made some whoppers. And it's certainly not beyond the realm of reason that his alcoholic behavior was a contributor to that. Next question. Do you think that the history of the Giants in San Francisco would have been different without Candlestick Park? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The motivating factor for both Stoneham and O'Malley to move out of New York was the ballparks. It was the 50s by now, and people were traveling to their destinations by automobile, and those old ballparks in the inner city in New York didn't accommodate cars. And as long as that was the case, their attendance was going to continue to dwindle in New York. So that was the ballpark that was the real attractor, as well as the great new California markets. And so Stoneham had Candlestick Park fulfilled its promise and not just been a brand new, modern, state-of-the-art conception of a baseball stadium, but it actually delivered on that promise and been a pleasant venue to visit, easy to get in and out of, had not the worst conceivable weather you could possibly have in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's what Candlestick Park delivered. Without that dead weight of Candlestick dragging behind them, it's entirely likely that the Giants would have been far more successful than they were at fighting off the direct competition from the A's. That it was what killed Stoneham's ownership, was the dwindling attendance driven by the competition from the A's. The Oakland Coliseum, we're looking at it now as a sad old ballpark, but at the time it was a great ballpark, and it was distinctly better than Candlestick. It was easier to get into and out of. It was more comfortable to sit in. The sight lines were better. Everything about the Coliseum was better than Candlestick, and that was a real problem for the Giants. Oh, there's so many questions here. This is great. Could you give us some background on the Horace Stoneham Herman Franks relationship? That's a great question. They were great friends. They came to know each other in the 40s when Franks was a backup catcher very briefly in the major league system for the Giants, but mostly in the minors. And then Franks became a coach under Leo DeRocher with the Giants. And Franks remained with the organization all the way through. He was a minor league manager. He was a scout. He was definitely one of the most key inner circle advisors that Stoneham relied upon was Franks, even before he was named manager. Franks was also a financial advisor. His other job, other than being a baseball guy, was his financial advisor. And among his clients as a financial advisor was Willie Mays. A staggering conflict of interest, but nobody seemed to mind that the Giants manager was also a financial advisor of the Giants superstar player. So that when Stoneham was negotiating contract with Willie Mays, he was negotiating with Horace Stoneham, who was acting as Mays's de facto agent. It was a very strong relationship. They loved each other. And when Franks opted to retire from baseball after the 1968 season and become a full-time financial investment advisor, Stoneham was not happy to see him go. He respected Franks and wished him well, but no, they were great friends. Among the very closest of friends that Stoneham had was Herman Franks. Next question: how would you characterize the relationship between Walter O'Malley and Horace Stoneham? They had a symbiotic relationship, that's for sure. That's a very good word for it. Doggone, is it too late to throw that in the book there? That's a great term for it, symbiotic. They weren't social friends in the sense that they would hang out together, but they respected each other. It was O'Malley's initial. It was O'Malley who was the one who actually suggested that they should move to California together, but that wasn't the first time that Stoneham had ever considered that idea. But it just made so much sense for them both to do it that it was kind of almost inevitable that eventually that's what they would decide to do. If O'Malley hadn't suggested it, I'm very confident that Franks would, or that Stoneham would have suggested it as well. They knew each other well. They respected each other. Then later on in the late 60s, when Horace Stoneham's nephew, Chub Feeney, who was his right-hand man in operating the Giants for more than 20 years, when the Giants were in financial straits and looking for ways to cut payroll, it was O'Malley's suggestion that they move Chub Feeney from the Giants to become the commissioner of baseball, because that would be a good way for Feeney to move on from the Giants and enhance his career, and also a graceful way for Stoneham to, let Feeney, do better than he was going to do if he'd stayed with the Giants. And that was O'Malley's doing. O'Malley was the one who orchestrated that because he wanted to help. As it turned out, that Feeney did not get approved to be the commissioner of baseball, but very shortly thereafter, he was approved to be the president of the National League. And once again, O'Malley, the National League president was Chub Feeney, but at that period, it was O'Malley who orchestrated everything in the National League, and that was O'Malley's. Next question. As a Reds fan, we appreciated the trade of Frank Duffy for George Foster. That trade might have been made under the influence of Scotch. Yeah, that one might have. Among the questionable trades that Stoneham made in this period, you can sort of see the logic in a lot of his trades. They may not have turned out well, but you could see how it might have turned out well, what the concept was behind it. There is no rational concept between George Foster for Frank Duffy. It may very well have been just a moment of inebriated poor judgment on Stoneham's part. In the book, I talk about it, and it's impossible for us to ignore the racial aspect of it. Duffy was black and Foster was black and Duffy was white. And that was only one of a long series of trades that Stoneham's Giants made throughout the 60s and 70s that were white for black trades, or black for white trades, I'm sorry. And, you know, I just think the image of George Foster compared to the image of Frank Duffy was what drove that trade. Foster, you know, a terrific prospect, a power hitting outfielder with good range, was an inarticulate black kid from East LA. While Frank Duffy was, you know, a freckle-faced Irish American. He'd been the backup quarterback at Stanford and had a psychology degree from Stanford. He presented an image that Foster just, you know, couldn't compete with. And, you know, I think that imagery was what clouded Stoneham's judgment. It was not a trade that made any sense at all from a baseball point of view, but, you know, it was exciting for Stoneham to get somebody as accomplished as Frank Duffy, as strange as that may sound. That was an inexplicable trade. Was Horus an active participant in the Cepeda-Mccovey controversy? Well, yes, in the sense that Horus was an active participant in everything. Nothing happened on the Giants that Horace Stoneham wasn't keenly aware of and keenly involved in. It's my judgment that this was another one of the key mistakes that Stoneham's Giants made. They had, you know, a great problem to have. They had two Hall of Fame bound first basemen, you know, starting out their careers. This is terrific. But the obvious decision to make was to put Mccovey at first base. He was 6'4", left-handed, and not a good defensive player. And Cepeda in left field. Cepeda was 6'2", right-handed, far faster than Mccovey, a better all-around athlete. There's no reason in the world why Cepeda couldn't have become, if not an adequate defensive left fielder, quite possibly an excellent defensive left fielder. He had all the physical tools necessary. But Cepeda didn't work at it. He didn't want to be in left field. He complained about it the whole time. He didn't make the effort to become a good left fielder, and the whole time he's complaining about it. And first Bill Rigney, and then Tom Sheehan and Alvin Dark and Horace Stoneham, the whole time they were intimidated by Cepeda. They let Cepeda dictate to them how this was going to be resolved. And first they put Mccovey on the bench, and then they put Mccovey in left field, all to accommodate Cepeda. That was a very poor choice for them to make, and certainly Stoneham has to be held accountable for it. He was the general manager. It was his decision to tell his manager where to play these guys, and he whiffed on that one. Next question. Were you already underway researching and writing, or was there anything that happened, or did you run across that made you stop and think, why did I start this project? Well, there's a lot of times I thought, what in the world was I thinking? Why did I take this on? I came along that upon that a lot. This project, you know, specifically, I worked on it beginning in earnest in about 2015. So it took about 4 years of really intense writing and researching. But honestly, I'd been working on this book for 40 years before that. You know, I'm a born and bred Giants fan. A lot of the games and events that I describe in the book, I either, you know, listened to on the radio or was actually at Candlestick Park. So I really did know about the history of the Giants. I didn't know much about Horace Stoneham because he was so non-prominent. He didn't want to be known, and so he was always in the background. So I didn't know much about him until you know, much later. But you know, this was a project that was decades decades in the writing. What I discovered in doing the actual research was just how much content there is here. It's a huge story. It takes place over, you know, more than half a century, and the Giants are just such a storied franchise. You know, there's everyone in this book, from John McCraw to John Montefusco and everybody in between. There's just a lot of content, and so the real challenge of it was to fit it in and get it all in the book and make the narrative, you know, the pace be quick enough. That was the real challenge of it. It was definitely, though, I would say, a labor of love, the one that I'm so happy that I undertook. Next question. What can you tell us about the Orlando Cepeda for Ray Sadecki trade? Well, I can tell you this, at the age of 8 years old, I was aghast. I was horrified, as was just about everybody else in the Bay Area. The story of that trade is that the Giants had painted themselves into a corner. They boxed themselves in because they had botched the decision of what to do with Cepeda and Mccovey. That when Cepeda hurt his knee in 1965, Mccovey then became the first baseman by default and did great. Of course, just really took that opportunity and kept it. So when Cepeda is recovered from his knee surgery in early 1966, Cepeda now he's grown up. He's mature. He's no longer dogging it. He's no longer refusing to go play left field. He says, yeah, I'll play left field. It's the right thing for the team. I'll do it. But by this time, he's coming off of knee surgery. Now he physically can't play left field. So the Giants are stuck. They have 2 first basemen, and neither of them can play left field. And so they were forced to have to trade one of them. It put him in the worst possible bargaining position. We Giants fans were aghast that all the Giants could get for Orlando Cepeda, this, multi-time all-star, career 300 hitter, superstar player. All you can get for him is Ray Sadecki. Well, yeah, that's all they could get for him because they had put themselves in a terrible bargaining position. If this is not the off season when they can negotiate with any one of the other 19 ball clubs. This is May of '66. So they're restricted to National League trading partners only, unless Cepeda is going to clear waivers and get out of the National League. That's not going to happen. So immediately it goes down to 9 possible trading partners. And of those 9 possible trading partners, the only possible ones that's going to make sense are teams that need a first baseman. A team like the Cubs, they got Ernie Banks, they're not going to trade for Cepeda. A team like the Braves, they've got Felipe Alou, they're not going to trade for Cepeda. What team needs a first baseman? The St. Louis Cardinals need a first baseman. So that was the fit there. It was only 2 teams in the league that really had a hole that Cepeda could fill, and the Cardinals were one of them. The other one was the Houston Astros. And what the Giants needed in return was a left-handed starting pitcher. That was their need. They had a hole as left-handed starting pitching. And the Cardinals had lots of left-handed starting pitchers. In addition to Sadecki, they had Kurt Simmons, they had Larry Jaster, they had Al Jackson. I may be missing somebody here, but they had plenty of left-handed starting pitchers. So, the Cardinals knew that the Giants had to make this deal, and the Cardinals knew that they had what the Giants needed. So they put the Cepeda for Sadecki offer on the table in spring training. And Stoneham was not eager to do it. Stoneham did not want to make that trade. Stoneham was against it. But once again, it wasn't just his decision. He relied upon his circle of advisors. And there were 2 among his circle of advisors that were all for the trade. One was Herman Franks, and the other was Chub Feeney. And if Herman Franks and Chub Feeney were both in favor of something and really emphatic about it, then Stoneham was going to listen to him. The logic from both Feeney's and Franks' point of view was, look, we know we're not getting value for value here with Sadecki, but we have to resolve this Mccovey-Cepeda situation. We can't keep letting this fester. And Sadecki, though he's no Cepeda, is, he was still only 25 years old. He was a pitcher without much of a track record of success, but he certainly had the potential to be successful. And after a terrible 1966 season, Sadecki was good for the Giants in 67, 68. So it was a deal that poor decisions earlier on had led to the Giants simply being in a situation they had to take it. They really at that point had no other choice. Next question. How do you reconcile his intelligence in industry with what seems at times maddening passivity? Red Smith wrote in 1957 that Stoneham, quote, sat for 20 years watching the deterioration of the wonderful organization he had inherited, unquote. I'm not sure I buy Red Smith's observation there, but it is certainly true that Stoneham's track record in New York, in particular his track record in the first 10 years of his ownership of the Giants, was not good. He inherits the Giants in 1936. They're a great team. They win the pennant in 36 and 37. You know, Stoneham's they're on autopilot. This is Bill Terry's team, and he's got Carl Hubble and Mel Ott. You know, just a great team. They win it in 36, 37. But then they begin to age out a little bit, and Stoneham and Bill Terry, to be fair, did not do a good job of refreshing the roster and rebuilding it. The team just kind of sank. Stoneham makes the decision in 1941 to promote Mel Ott from superstar right fielder to player manager. And Stoneham did that because he loved Mel Ott and wanted to do what was best for Mel Ott. But that was not a good choice. Ott was not cut out to be a manager, and Ott, you know, did his level best, but he was in over his head. And so it wasn't until 1948 when finally, in desperation, Stoneham does the unthinkable and fires his beloved Mel Ott and hires none other than Leo DeRocher to come in and replace him. You know, the most staggering, stunning, completely unforeseen decision he could possibly have made. It was at that point that, with DeRocher on board, Stoneham gets serious about refashioning the team and rebuilding it. And with Stoneham, or with DeRocher as his manager, they achieved great success. They won, you know, 2 pennants in the World Series, and they were quite successful in the early 50s. To answer that question, I agree with you. He may have saved the franchise by moving to San Francisco, but was he only saving it temporarily? Turned out from himself. I think that's a little bit hard on Stoneham. Yes, I say he made his share of mistakes, but he also made lots of good moves. He made plenty of smart trades as well. The organization he built was great. I mean, they had the best scouting and farm system in the major leagues. Nobody else was as good as the Giants were at signing and developing talent. The Giants were great at it. That's to Stoneham's credit. It was Stoneham who hired Carl Hubble to oversee the farm system, and Hubble was brilliant at it, absolutely brilliant at it. That's, you know, Stoneham deserves credit for that. I think that certainly Stoneham could have made a couple of fewer dumb trades, would have helped them out. But what really killed the Giants in San Francisco was Candlestick Park and the arrival of the A's, and both of those things were beyond Stoneham's control. Those were the cards he was dealt, and I really don't see any other owner, given that situation, having much more success in that circumstance than Stoneham did. Next question. Please discuss the firing of Rigney and the hiring of Sheehan in 1960 and his long relationship with Sheehan. That's a great one. Among the mistakes that Stoneham made was to fire Bill Rigney in 1960 and hire Tom Sheehan. Sheehan was another one of Stoneham's kind of lifers, his inner circle guys. Sheehan had been a journeyman pitcher for about 20 years, mostly in the minor leagues. He had a few brief moments in the majors, but he was mostly a AAA pitcher for a long time. And after that, he became a scout. And he was a scout in the Giants organization for 25 years before 1960. And Sheehan had Stoneham's ear, and the Giants in 1960 were favored to win the pennant, and they bolted out to a great lead early in the season, and then it was June, so they had a swoon, and they were slumping in June. And the whole time Sheehan was up there in Stoneham's, box drinking scotch with him and saying, this is the problem. Here's Rigney. This guy Rigney, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. You got to get a different manager. And in a bad moment, Stoneham listened to him and fired Rigney and hired Sheehan. Sheehan had never managed anywhere before. He'd never managed in minor leagues. He was not a good manager, and the players did not respect Sheehan at all. Even though Sheehan was not announced as an interim manager, I think the players could sense that he was just a caretaker until Stone got his next real manager. So they ran wild on Sheehan. They broke curfew and gambled and drank all night, and the team just fell out of it and finished in the second division in 1960. That was one of Stoneham's poor choices, and then he compounded it following the 1960 season by the real replacement for Rigney that he hires is Alvin Dark. Alvin Dark had been a great star player for the Giants and the team captain, the on-field team leader. And Stoneham no doubt felt that he would be a forceful leader, somebody that the players would really rally behind. No, no, that one didn't work out well. Dark is another guy who'd never managed before, and he was in over his head. He later had a couple of other managing stints in his career, and was a little bit less out of his depth than he was with the Giants. But the players, we can get into the Dark situation, but it compounded. Had Stoneham simply ridden it out with Rigney through the 60s, I'm confident the Giants would have been better off. Next question. Why did no one in Horace's circle advisors during the post-New York years, when the Giants were good, not great, tell him what holes in the roster needed to be filled? Seems like he kept repeating the same mistake and nobody stopped him from doing it. Not even Bill Rigney or Alvin Dark or Herman Franks, all very experienced and no shrinking violets. Why was Stoneham indulged in mediocrity like that? That's one of the essential questions of the book is, why did they get stuck in that loop in the 60s? And ultimately it was Stoneham's accountability. He wanted input and advice. He didn't just want his people to be yes men. But at the end of the day, he was the boss. He was the guy. It was his team. He wasn't just the general manager. He was the owner. He signed everybody's paycheck. And I think it's certainly possible that the Rigneys and the Darkses and the Frankses and the Chubb Feeneys, didn't quite tell Horace what he really needed to hear, which was, we got to stop playing Jesus Alou as a regular. We got to stop playing Hal Lanier as a regular. These decisions are not working out, and we need to make some changes there. And they didn't. So yeah, Stoneham deserves credit for the positive strengths of the organization, which were abundant, but he also deserves accountability for the failures. And they were real good, but not quite good enough. And that dynamic of decision making from about mid 60s onward, it could have been better. It could have been better, no doubt about it. Next question, could you talk a little bit about his childhood? Oh boy, is this fascinating or what? Horace Stoneham, lest we forget, was the son of Charles Stoneham. And Charles Stoneham was among the most notorious and colorful and zany, crazy characters in New York in the early decades of the 20th century. He was a self-made multi-millionaire in an era when multi-millions of dollars was a whole lot of money. He was extraordinarily wealthy. He made his money on Wall Street, engaging in securities trading practices that were definitely shady, if not blatantly illegal, then certainly unethical. He was indicted multiple times. He was accused of wrongful misdeeds, of which he was no doubt 100% guilty. So this is Horace Stoneham's father. Horace Stoneham grows up in unparalleled luxury. He's the richest kid in New York. He lives in glamorous hotels. We have pictures of him, sitting in carriages with ponies, and he was the most spoiled, rotten, rich kid you can possibly imagine. And his personality was very different from his father's. His father was a self-made millionaire and a workaholic, as well as undoubtedly an alcoholic, but a hard guy, a tough guy, a hard worker who everybody respected, but nobody liked, nobody trusted. And Horace was not that way at all. Horace was a sweet kid. Everybody loved Horace. Everybody who ever knew this guy just loved him. He didn't have a bad word to say about anybody. And he grew up, his favorite thing in the world was to watch the Giants play. And so what does his father do? Well, he goes and buys the Giants. Here, Horace, this is yours. He literally bought the team for his son. as a gift for his son, as his family inheritance. It's amazing. And I will say this: when Charles first bought the team and gave it to Horace, and the whole idea was that Horace was going to take over. That was the plan. Horace was just in high school at the time. And as soon as Horace graduates high school, Charles says, "Okay, I'm going to send you to college because you're going to get a college education." Because that's one thing Charles didn't have, was college education. He dropped out of school when he was a kid, and Charles wanted his son to be college educated, to be a full, well-rounded, educated person, to really manage this great business as best he could. Well, Horace was lazy and he dropped out of college, dropped out of Fordham, and his father was just apoplectic. You can't do this. You're ruining the whole plan. So finally, after a couple of years of Horace kicking around, Charles hatches a plan to get his son to grow up. And among Charles's many properties that he owned was a copper mine in the Sierra Nevada mountains in Calaveras County, a town called Copperopolis. I don't know, many of you may know where Copperopolis is. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And in 1923, it was really out in the middle of nowhere. It was a tough, hard place, a copper mine. And Horace Stoneham, this rich city kid, dandy kid who'd never worked a day in his life, gets on a train in New York and goes all the way to Copperopolis, California, and works in a copper mine. I cannot imagine what the miners must have thought about this kid, Horace Stoneham. But he's Horace Stoneham. He charmed them. Everybody liked him. He gained their respect, and he did grow up. He did learn to respect them. He respected hard work. He respected the never-ending demands of hard work. And it was his school of hard knocks. His college degree was working for a year and a half in Copperopolis, and he got, good reviews from the mine foreman. And finally, in 1924, Charles sends him a telegram and says, "Okay, you've proved your worth. You're going to come to Florida, and you're going to join the Giants, and you're going to work for me from now on." That's how that came to be. If a screenwriter, a Hollywood screenwriter, wrote this script, it would be rejected as the most ridiculous, implausible plot you could ever come up with. All right. Next question. What primary sources did you find or use? Not nearly as many as I would like, because, of course, most of the people who take part in this great story died many decades ago. I did have the great fortune of meeting Horace Stoneham's granddaughters. Get their names right here. Jamie, Kim, and Sonia. They're the daughters of Horace's daughter, Mary. They're the daughters of Mary's husband, Chuck Rupert, who worked with the Giants. And they gave me tons of stuff. A lot of photographs that I use in the book, and lots of just invaluable stories about their grandfather. They gave me insight into what his personality was like, what he was like, to really get to know. They adored him. He was Horace Stoneham. He was a sweet, doting grandfather. So that was a great resource. I got to talk with Chub Feeney's kids. I talked with his son, as well as his daughter, Katie Feeney, before she unfortunately passed away. I talked with them. I had lots of interview material. The whole reason I did this book is because Rob Garrett, who I think many of you may know, Rob Garrett wrote a great book on the history of the Giants. And Rob was the one who told me, he said, "Steve, Horace Stoneham's biography needs to be written, and you're the guy who needs to do it." And he was right. I guess he is. And so Rob gave me a ton of his research material and talking with people in the front office of the Giants, John Tediucci and Bob Lurie and other people who gave me insight into Horace. But a lot of the research I did was not primary sources. It was books and articles, contemporary stuff that was written decades ago about Horace Stoneham. Horace Stoneham, because he was so shy, so publicity shy, he wasn't quoted much. So you don't get a lot of direct Horace Stoneham quotes. You have to kind of come by it indirectly and find out what other people said about him. Among the admirers that Horace Stoneham had was Bill Veeck. Veck had great respect for Horace Stoneham. Veck, as you well know, did not have great respect for a lot of baseball owners. He found them stuffy and old-fashioned and, you know, not very forward-thinking. He didn't feel that way about Horace Stoneham at all. He thought Stoneham was very sharp. And it was Veck and Stoneham who basically founded the Cactus League. They both loved Arizona and they wanted to do spring training in Arizona. So it was Veck and Stoneham in the late 40s who founded the Cactus League. Okay, next question. The Giants had Mccovey, Cepeda, and Bill White at around the same time. What can you do with 3 first basemen? Well, you have to make at least one trade, which they did. And you know, it was the Giants' phenomenal scouting system that provided them with first Bill White, then Orlando Cepeda and Willie Mccovey. And the key actor in that was Alejandro Alex Pompez, who Stoneham hired in 1951 as the Negro Leagues are crumbling. Pompez was the owner of the New York Cubans Negro League team, whose home ballpark was the Polo Grounds. So Stoneham was Pompez's landlord. That's how they got to know each other. But as the baseball integration, Major League Baseball integration is starting, they both understand that the Negro Leagues are going to collapse. And so what can we do? And so Stoneham hired Pompez, the first black man in a front office in Major League Baseball by probably at least 10 or 15 years. And it was Pompez who had this enormous network of scouts in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and in the States, the Negro League scouts. And it was through Pompez that the Giants got Bill White and Orlando Cepeda and Willie Mccovey. But, you know, they're all 3 great young first basemen. They can't all play at the same time. So the first decision that Stoneham made was to trade Bill White. And in this case, he made a very good trade. He got full value out of Bill White, trading to the Cardinals for Toothpick Sam Jones, who was, you know, not a young pitcher at this time. He only had a couple of good years left, but he was great for the Giants in 59 and 60. That was a very wise move on Stoneham's behalf, Stoneham's part, to make that trade. You know, like I say, the next thing to do was put Mccovey at first base and never question that decision, and put Cepeda in left field and just tell him to shut up and do it. And that's what the Giants didn't do. And so that led to the logjam being there in 66. Next question. Christy Mathewson. I always slip his name into the conversation whenever I have the chance. Always a good call. Always a good call. Charles Stoneham's father's, Horace Stoneham's father, Charles, his favorite player was Mike Kiernan, the Giants star left fielder in the 1880s and 90s when Charles Stoneham was a kid. Well, guess who Horace Stoneham's favorite player was? It was Christy Mathewson. Of course, it would be Christy Mathewson, who was the superstar pitcher for the Giants when Horace was a kid. Horace's first game he ever saw at the Polo Grounds was in 1912, and Christy Mathewson was the pitcher. Christy Mathewson, of course, was the great, great friend of John McGraw. You couldn't be more opposite personalities, yet they were very close, mutually respectful. And it was through the McGraw-Mathewson partnership that the Giants were such a great success before Charles Stoneham bought the team. Horace didn't get to know Christy Mathewson that well, because by the time Horace was with the Giants in the 20s, Mathewson was quite ill with tuberculosis and soon died. But Horace got to know John McGraw very well, and you know, there was no greater fan of Christy Mathewson than John McGraw. Next question. Willie Mays had a hard time finding a house in his first years in San Francisco. Very sad story. If any, what role, if any, did Stoneham play in getting Mays basically integrated into a high-end neighborhood? I'm sure most of you know the story, but you know, when the Giants moved to San Francisco, Willie Mays went house hunting in you know, one of the swanky Marina area, one of the swanky neighborhoods, and tried to buy a house, and of course was, you know, given the runaround, and you know, oh, I'm sorry, that property is no longer available. Here we are in liberal progressive San Francisco, and a superstar black athlete can't buy a house. That, that wasn't a secret. The newspapers got a hold of it. It became a big scandal. I don't think it was Horace Stoneham who resolved that. I think it was Bob Lurie who resolved that. Bob Lurie was the son of, I'm gonna whiff on his name here, but Bob Lurie's father was, one of the richest real estate people in San Francisco. He owned the Mark Hopkins Hotel and a number of other great properties. And so Bob Lurie was very, very well connected in the real estate business in San Francisco. And I strongly, and Bob Lurie was on the Giants board of directors. They elected him to the board in 1958 when they arrived in San Francisco, precisely so they would have this local contact, this respected business leader on their board. And I strongly suspect that it was Bob Lurie who interceded in that situation and, told the real estate people to knock it off. If Willie Mays wants to buy a house, Willie Mays is going to buy a house. And so Mays did buy a house in the Marina District, and of course became an immediate, the most popular guy in the neighborhood. Mays was such a candid, unique personality. Mays was shy and skeptical and mistrustful of adults. He always was afraid that somebody was going to be picking his pocket, and he was often right. Mays loved kids, loved children, and just wanted to be with them. And so he opened up his house to the kids. He'd done in New York and Harlem, playing stickball with the kids. In San Francisco, Mays was, his house on Halloween night was, all the kids in the city would come, and Mays would talk with them and, autograph balls for him. He was couldn't have been a better model citizen in San Francisco than Willie Mays. Steve, the Mets needed a first baseman in 1966. Well, you know that they did, and I know that they did. But Eddie Kranepool was their guy. And Eddie Kranepool in 66 was still only, what was he, 22? The Mets were committed to Eddie Kranepool, and it wouldn't be for several years later that they would finally acknowledge that Eddie Kranepool was never going to blossom into the superstar that they expected he would. So no, the Mets didn't want Cepeda. The Mets wanted Mays. Joan Payson had been on the Giants board of directors in New York. And she hated it when the Giants moved to San Francisco, because that meant that New York lost Willie Mays. And so she spent her entire tenure as new owner of the Mets calling Horace Stoneham on the phone and asking him what it would take for him to trade or sell Willie Mays to the Mets. And so if the Giants had offered Mays, the Mets would have taken him, but not Cepeda. Next question. Steve Carlton was in the organization. Yes, Steve Carlton was in the Cardinals organization in 1966. Carlton had actually been a bonus baby in 1965. He was on the Major League roster for all of 65. In 66, they were finally able to farm him out without losing him. And he was, obviously a super prize prospect. I strongly suspect the Giants talked to the Cardinals and said, hey, who was the GM for the Cardinals 66? I don't think it was Bing Devine anymore. It may have been Bing Devine. Anyway, I'm certain that Stoneham said, hey, I'll give you Cepeda if you give me Carlton. And the Cardinals said, no. No, we're not going to do that. So they had to settle for Sadecki instead. Don't diss Ed Kranepool, I won't stand for it. Sorry. Kranepool in any other circumstance would have been understood to be the solid, good, major league player he was, but he was given this ballyhooed treatment by the Mets. He was the local New York kid who was going to be their marquee player, and when he became just a journeyman player, not a star, he had this aura of not meeting his expectation, which is not really fair. Zach, you're going to have to help me out with time here. Are we up against a time limit?
We are a little bit over an hour, but if you wanted to take a couple of more questions from the chat, that would be fine. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and close her out with a reminder to buy your book, and then also Saturdays. meeting reminder.
Awesome. I will take two more. This is great. This is exactly what I want to do, guys, is to talk about what you want to talk about. This is great. I'll take two more and then I'll close it out. The first question: what was Stoneham's stance on integration in Jackie Robinson? Why did he hire and keep on Alvin Dark, given his attitudes toward blacks? This is the big conundrum. Stoneham was, as was Leo DeRocher, genuinely committed to racial integration. Stoneham wanted to integrate the franchise and did so very, very willingly. And in 1956, he traded for Jackie Robinson to try to get him to be the Giants. He was a genuine advocate for it. Why, given all that, did he hire Alvin Dark? Dark had, some positive qualities about him, but he was also an unreconstructed Southern racist. He didn't hide it. That's who he was. How Stoneham could have thought that guy would be a good fit for the Giants clubhouse, and it wasn't just the African American players the Giants had; it was all the Latin players. Stoneham antagonized just about everybody on the roster, but he antagonized nobody more than he antagonized the Latin players. I mean, Cepeda just absolutely could not stand Alvin Dark. Chub Feeney did not want someone to hire Dark, advised against it, but in this case, Stoneham would not be dissuaded. It was among the major errors he made was to hire Dark to be the manager and then stick with him for 4 years. There's so many more questions here. Let's see. Did Horace Stoneham have brothers and sisters? That's a complicated question. The short answer is yes. The long answer is we don't quite know exactly how many. Because Horace Stoneham's father, among his other attributes, was almost certainly a bigamist, and almost certainly had at least one, and maybe more than one, secret wife and secret family, in addition to the one he had where he had Horus. In Horace's immediate family, he had a brother and a sister. The brother was older than Horace. Horace was the second child, and the sister was younger. That child drowned in 1905 when Horace was 2 years old. So then Horace became the oldest son and the heir. Horace then also had a younger sister, Mary. One of the maddening things about the Stoneham family is they all use the same names over and over and over again. So there's a bunch of Marys and a bunch of Horaces, a bunch of Charleses. But Horace very likely had other half brothers or sisters by his father's other families. It's speculated that among the reasons Horace never got divorced, he and his wife were apart for many years before they reconciled. One of the reasons that Horace never divorced is because he was afraid that in a divorce settlement, all this family stuff was going to come out again and he would lose control of the Giants, which he obviously didn't do. So I hope I was able to do justice for these questions. These are great questions. This is wonderful stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much for indulging me. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. We really appreciate everything you've done for Sabre and for putting together this great book, which I highly recommend everybody go out and get. But looking forward to tackling it a little bit more. Got into it a little bit over the last week, but look forward to tackling it at a much more heavier pace coming soon. And I did want to be in closing to remind everybody that we will continue this Giants theme this Saturday on the 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we will have Lincoln Mitchell discuss the Giants and their city, which is a continuation of the next era, which is the Bob Lurie era that followed right after Stoneham's ownership of the Giants. So look forward to having everybody join us on Saturday. Again, Steve, we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for putting together that great book and for sharing the story of Horace Stoneham with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.